What's the problem with social media? In my opinion, it's that they oversimplify everything. That is, Israel, if you analyze it in depth, is a very complex society. It's multicultural, a democracy, and has a lot of diversity. But on social media, it's portrayed as if it's just the oppressed and the oppressor, the poor Palestinians and the evil Israel. But they don't understand that, for example, 2 million Arabs live in Israel. So what happens? In the international press, if you notice, the simplification is often greatly amplified. I understand in the media they only have a short time to explain a news story, so they simplify a lot. But where does it get even worse? On social media? Before, people used to have much more patience. I, who am more or less from the time when books were still used to do school assignments, and by the time I was graduating from school, the internet was already being used a lot. It's not like the previous generation where you had to look for a book, read it, open the page. Nowadays, ChatGPT, tell me, what are the chloroplasts and how does the photosynthesis system work? 3 seconds, that's all I can wait. 4 seconds makes me impatient. People may not remember, but we used to be happy waiting 20 minutes for internet results. Nowadays, if it takes 30 seconds, people get impatient. So social media is like that. Scrolling, and that's why the simplification is very, very big. And that's why the perception people have of Israel gets so distorted. Israel gets turned into a caricature, and that's the big problem. We, who are people with a lot of things to say, have to simplify the message in very quick terms, in very simple terms. So that's why it's a very big challenge for us. How do they operate, those who are against Israel? How do they create narratives, basically, around the humanitarian issue? You know that Israel is the only aggressor. The Palestinians are always portrayed as complete victims who never do anything wrong. Also, as we've seen in this course, they often manipulate language. So they talk about, for example, the Palestinian resistance and not about the terrorists, or that Israel was disproportionate, that it had a disproportionate response, and all this kind of language. And the occupied territories, we've already seen this in other things. So, and this is what they did understand. And this is one of the main messages I've given you throughout this course. That's why I want to close with this idea in this last module of the course. The point is that they, our adversaries, understood very well how to focus on emotions, not on the facts. They are going to show images of victims, of wounded children, never the context, never what lies behind it. Instead, they're going to show the emotional side to the public, and that's why perception is so easy to digest, because the story is easier to understand than the data. And obviously, they systematically hide Hamas's crimes and of other groups like Islamic Jihad and so on. So that's why, yes, it's a challenge, it's a difficulty, but let's see what can be done. Well, this is something else I'd like to tell you because it's very interesting. But do you know how the Arab Spring happened? I'll tell you briefly. What was the Arab Spring? In the Arab world, there are dictatorships. Why? Because they're not really nations, but rather tribes. During the 20th century, when the Europeans arrived, they created countries. Great Britain and France, they started drawing countries on a map. They said, well, this is going to be called Syria on a map, this is going to be called Lebanon, this is going to be called Iraq, and they invented artificial countries. The problem is that Syria is actually a country with many ethnicities, families, and clans. They have nothing that unites them. That's why civil wars happen so often. The only thing that unites them is a dictator, and when that dictator is weak, there are civil wars. And if there's a dictator with a firm hand, then the country stays in a controlled state of tension. There's another way Arab countries have remained, let's say, stable, and that's with the common enemy they have, Israel. So all the Arab countries say, well, let's unite to get rid of Israel. So that has also kept them together. It's true. But I don't know if you remember that in 2012, and we're talking after a century of dictatorships. In 2012, there was a boom in social networks, which is Facebook. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat also a huge surge in use. 2011, 12, 13. The Arabs started to finally give their opinions. They were no longer subject to the press. The press in dictatorial countries like in the Arab world will always show support for the dictator. They won't criticize the dictator, but then social media let the Arab world do just that. And through social media, what was called the Arab Spring began. It was a series of civil wars in the Arab world to remove the dictators from power. It was total chaos. The civil war in Syria, 500,000 dead. In Yemen, it's still going on, and so on. In Syria, it's still going on. But throughout the Middle East, it was like that. Some countries managed to calm this down more easily, others with a much heavier hand. In Egypt, in just one day, they killed 2,000 protesters demanding Mubarak's removal. It was total chaos. And that alone. Remember, it involves social networks, specifically Twitter, with tweets like, let's liberate Syria. The biggest chaos in the Middle East was triggered. So that's why I wanted to give you this information, because I can't. And even more so with social networks. By the way, they understood it very well. Now I want to mention some of them. First one has to learn from history. There's a saying, and we said this on the day of the Shoah, of the Holocaust. He who does not know his history is doomed to repeat it. We need to recognize our mistakes to avoid repeating them. In fact, in Japanese, I remember when I was working in engineering at a company, I remember that sometimes we had conversations with Japanese engineers, and they explained to us in Japan, the mentality is like this. How do you say it? Error. Error. For the Japanese, it is an opportunity to improve. That's a mistake. But how do you say it? Second mistake. That's it. It's over. You're fired. That's essentially the Japanese mentality if you didn't understand and learn the first time. That's it. How will you keep making mistakes? And that's exactly why it's important. Israel, we underestimated social media. I mean, we put a lot of emphasis on the issue of military urgency, which isn't exactly wrong either. Military urgency has always been very important. But we forgot about social media. While our enemies were making bots. I don't know if you know about Iran. Iran showed how they did it. Do you know what bots are? Bots are like, let's say, automated systems where they comment or post videos and comment, let's say, many times. Israel, a country, made accounts that massively comment on that in many videos. And that's why the algorithms are heavily fed with an anti-Israel narrative. That's a technology that objectively Israel could stop instantly. Because Israel has a lot of technology in the field of cybersecurity and this, but we underestimated this issue. That was our mistake. So that's why it's this. Another thing is that the official sources from Israel, I must say, are not very efficient. The international journalists. They don't get information from the Israeli government quickly. It's not very clear, let's say, what the Israeli government says when an event happens. It doesn't reach journalists clearly, and therefore it doesn't reach social media clearly, let's say, accurately. So that's why there's also some inefficiency in that part of it. Israel's public diplomacy. And why am I telling you this? Because personally, I'm one of those people who doesn't believe that salvation will come from the government. There are people who say, why don't they send the Mossad? Why doesn't the government of Israel do this or that? I think in my mind they are busy. It depends on me. The future depends on me. And that's how I would like you to understand it as well. It's true that there are many people working hard to defend Israel, but also we can't pretend to put all the burden on a government office that's supposed to face this sea of lies. That's why it's important to understand that where they are ineffective, we must fill that gap. And also, internal mistakes end up favoring the enemy. Like issues, either due to diplomacy or strategy.